I don't think you need an opinion piece to know what we've been talking about since this whole horror began. I'm talking about the most recent horror with the attack of Hamas, and that is essentially, I don't see a good option for Israel. And I think going into Gaza to root out Hamas, as I've made the point many times to John Rothman, I don't know what people think that is, but it ain't a long weekend exercise. It would take months at best. Meantime, you're killing a civilian population. You're destroying a livelihood that's already a withering livelihood in Gaza. And more to the point, let's assume you could do it after many months, let's say. You'd still have to now set up, maybe with the international community, an administrative managerial strategy for Gaza. You've gotten rid of Hamas, good, but now you have to set up something to govern Gaza. You now own Gaza. So that's my issue with going into Gaza. I mean, it's a humanitarian catastrophe, okay? So don't get me wrong. That's the first thing. But after that, my point is, whatever strategies you've laid out, they better include what's going to happen after you own Gaza, because that's what you're going to be getting when you move in that way militarily. Sorry, Kim, go ahead.
How do you tell the good people from the bad?
Right,
I mean,
there you go.
because you could have a person who is completely innocent and lovely, or that person could be lying, and you don't know. So how do you really ever get to the bottom and the heart of the matter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like there has to be a different solution. There has to be I don't know. It's so complicated. It's why I think about it, and probably all my thoughts are just so like, oh, everyone else has already thought of that, Kim, you know, that would have worked and we would have done it long ago. But it's just it seems so insurmountable. And I don't know how the Israeli people or the Palestinian people ever have peace, ever. And their generations even down the road, how they ever have peace.
Well, it's harder now probably than it's been in a while. I would say that they were close to peace under Yitzhak Rabin. The accords that were forged with Arafat and Clinton, I mean, that seemed to be a real chance. And since then, there's been a general descent into what you're describing, which is, I just don't know what you do. Now, to be clear, Benjamin Netanyahu is bad news, man. He is the wrong guy for this moment. And he's the guy who runs Israel. He didn't protect the state of Israel. I mean, this place that is the one place that Jews are supposed to feel secure. This is really where the sins of the past, of anti-Semitism, of the Holocaust, etc., won't be visited upon these people who live in this strong state supported by many in the international community. But it didn't work out that way. This brutal slaughter massacre, which included every bit of barbarism and medieval aggression that you could imagine, this act happened on this strong man's watch. So he feels politically the need to punch back. And as I've just sort of summarized, I don't see how you punch back with any degree of strategy that takes into account the real effects of punching back. I get that you want to punch back. It's your ego. It's your anger. And so I gave Biden credit for having acknowledged that 9/11 propelled America into this awful situation with Iraq. And Afghanistan, by the way. But Iraq was just a fool's errand. It was clearly on the agenda before this whole thing happened. And we've talked about it. It was just they were looking for an excuse, really, to go into Iraq. That's what George Bush was doing, and he did it. So I thought that Biden did the right thing by suggesting that Netanyahu not be ruled by that impulse. It's funny, just because I hadn't planned to start on this, but just because we are talking about Hamas, the guy who is a big deal in Hamas, Mohammed Qasim Sawalha, he ran operations in the West Bank. Where is he? This Hamas terrorist, this high-up official in Hamas. Is he dug in some bunker in Gaza, in the West Bank? Is he in hiding? No. He lives in London. He lives in a state-funded home in London. Sawaha recently purchased his council property after living there since 2003. Got it for £112,000. It was a discount because of the UK's right-to-buy scheme. It's a 2-story property, comes with a garden and a garage. This is the guy who's high up in Hamas. It's located 10 minutes from the nearest synagogue, they say. He entered Britain through the use of a relative's passport in the 1990s and has since claimed British citizenship. I'll remind you, Hamas is a recognized terrorist organization, designated such by the United Kingdom. So the weirdness gets weirder.
The Mark Thompson Show.
He can work remotely, though, just like everybody else, which is what he's doing. 62-year-old is working remotely. They launder money. There's a lot more to Hamas than just... there's a lot of money laundering and stuff that's not just slitting people's throats, and you get it.
I've gotten a lot of messages lately regarding this conflict, and not a lot of messages are telling me, don't believe the mainstream media. The mainstream media is all pro-Israel. Well, the last time you told me not to believe the mainstream media, you were telling me not to get the COVID shot and that the vaccine was bad, right? And that COVID wasn't real. I just feel like there's so much in America that is unknown, that you don't know what to believe or what's true or what's not true. It's very difficult for the average person to really get a handle on what's happening there.
This from the chat line from Doug. Mark, I think you're wrong. Hamas drew first blood. They started the fight, and they don't understand anything but violence. It's unfortunate. Oh, I agree with that. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. Hamas is a brutal, bloodthirsty terrorist organization. I wouldn't dispute that in the least. I don't see where we disagree. Maybe was I talking about with the history of the region, maybe? The history of the region, as I've told you, it really depends when you walk into the movie on the Middle East. Because you can go back as far as you want. Go back to biblical times. I mean, there were Jews and non-Jews living there. Okay. It's all a question of when you walk into the movie. So in this case, Doug, you're talking about the movie walking in now, like what just happened. I was maybe referencing what had happened prior to that, but I completely agree with you. I will tell you one group that really is doing well because of the, shall we say, hostilities, to be polite about it, in the Middle East, and the fact that they could even grow in the spectrum that's included and also the intensity. There's one group, at minimum, I'm leaving aside the parties. I mean, I understand there's Hamas and the Israelis and Hezbollah, but there's one other group that is really excited about all this. I'm sure they would say they don't love war, but they benefit enormously from it. And I'm talking about, anybody? International arms dealers. That's right. The Middle East war adds to a surge in international arms sales. Israel's conflict with Hamas Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the rise of China have brought a boom for weapons makers and a chance for Washington to build closer military ties with other countries. Days after the assault by Hamas ignited this new war in the Middle East, shipments of American weapons began arriving in Israel. Smart bombs, ammunition, interceptors for the Iron Dome. The conflict between Israel and Hamas is just the latest impetus is a ding word, behind a boom in international arms sales that is bolstering profits and weapons-making capacity among American suppliers. We're not only the United States of guns, friends. We are the United States of arms suppliers. The surge in sales is providing the Biden administration with new opportunities to tie the militaries of other countries more closely to the United States. It's not just commerce, right? It's a real relationship. Even before Israel responded to the deadly Hamas attack, the combination of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the perception of a rising threat from China was spurring a global rush to purchase fighter planes, missiles, tanks, artillery, munitions, and other lethal equipment. It's also being driven, all of this, by the rapid pace of technological change in warfighting. So even well-armed nations have to buy new generations of equipment to stay competitive. Billions of dollars in orders.
Come see America.
Come see.
Yeah. Want to kill people? We got you.
Come for the Grand Canyon and a picture at the Golden Gate Bridge, but stay for the weapon systems we'll sell you, everybody. Yeah. Billions of dollars in orders are pending from allies in Asia, driven by the perception of a rising threat from China. That's the real thing. I can talk about that, if not today, maybe tomorrow. You begin another conflict of the sort that might be driven by China and, in the South China Sea, you've got yourself a real problem. If the United States would find themselves, I think, very, very stressed to the point of their inability really to handle it. Worldwide military spending last year on weapons, personnel, and other costs hit $2.2 trillion. Wow. So there's that. And then there is blowback on what's happening in Israel and in Gaza. And the ripple effect is extending to universities, as you know. They're university endowments that include a lot of money from interests connected to, I'm talking about people and foundations that care very much about the survival of Israel. And they feel as though that survival of Israel, which they see, this based on various letters and public statements, you can say they see it as an existential threat that Israel is enduring right now. They also see the media on campus, on many college campuses, as having completely passed over the Hamas attack on its way to Palestinian rights. And so what are they doing? They're pulling their support. They're pulling their money from a lot of these universities. And even in Hollywood, I saw that the co-head of film at CAA, the huge talent agency, resigned. She made a controversial social media post, and she stepped away from day-to-day leadership. She was a big deal. Like, she had a, CAA huge. She has a big star list, like Tom Cruise, Natalie Portman, think like that. Mm-hmm. So when she steps down, it's a big deal. Apparently, she'll still work with clients. She has Anne Hathaway, Reese Witherspoon. They mentioned Olivia Wilde. She says, I made a mistake with a repost in my Instagram story, which used hurtful language. Like so many of us, I have been reeling with heartbreak. I pride myself on being on the side of humanity and peace. I'm so grateful to Jewish friends and colleagues who pointed out the implications and further educated me. I immediately took the repost down. I don't see what her original post was, but I thought I'd seen it before. Here it is. She reposted on Instagram this. You're currently learning who supports genocide. So, you know, the blowback is real, I guess. I just was surprised to see it extend even into
real, but she should have known better. I mean, you don't talk about genocide to a group of people who've been like, I don't know, if you go back in history, I'm sure there are many incidents of genocide, but in the most recent that I can think of and the most egregious has been against the Jewish people. So you don't say that. How do you not know not to say that? And I don't think you can compare the two things. But then now that I've said that, I will get an email from someone who says, how could you say that? Look what they're doing to the Palestinian people. They have no food. They have no power. They have no, health care. They're in the dark. They have no way out. And so, and so back and forth it goes. But it's almost better just to say nothing at all. And then if you say nothing at all, then what does that say about you? That you're not feeling, that you don't feel that there's, that you don't mourn the loss of life there, that you're not affected by it? It's hard. This is a rough one.
Yeah, Thomas Friedman, who I'm not a fan of on all things. I'll give you one example, Iraq. Guy was I think he was a saber rattler for Iraq and a rah-rah dude. But I got to give the devil his due here. Now, he's clearly a very smart guy. But here, he is suggesting in a piece in the New York Times, an op-ed piece, that he cautions the mistakes of Iraq. So he's begun to, I think, see the light on this. He says, I have great admiration for how President Biden has used his empathy and physical presence in Israel to convince Israelis that they are not alone in their war against the barbaric Hamas, while trying to reach out to moderate Palestinians. Biden, I know, tried really hard to get Israeli leaders to pause in their rage and think 3 steps ahead, not only about how to get into Gaza to take down Hamas, but also about how to get out and how to do it with the fewest civilian casualties possible. So, this is what we were talking about a minute ago. While the president expressed deep understanding of Israel's moral and strategic dilemma, he pleaded with Israeli military and political leaders to learn from America's rush to war after September 11th, which took our troops deep into the dead ends and dark alleys of unfamiliar cities and towns in Iraq and Afghanistan. Anyway, I'll just skip ahead. I believe if Israel rushes headlong into Gaza now to destroy Hamas and does so without expressing a clear commitment to seek a 2-state solution with the Palestinian Authority and end Jewish settlements deep in the West Bank, it'll be making a grave mistake that will be devastating for Israeli interests and American interests. It could trigger a global conflagration and explode the entire pro-American alliance structure that the United States has built in the region since Henry Kissinger engineered the end of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. I'm talking about the Camp David Peace Treaty, the Oslo Peace Accords, the Abraham Accords, and the possible normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The whole thing could go up in flames, he says. This is not about whether Israel has the right to retaliate against Hamas for the savage barbarism it inflicted on Israeli men, women, babies, and grandparents. It surely does. This is about doing it the right way, the way that does not play into the hands of Hamas, Iran, and Russia. And he goes on, talks about if you go in, essentially he was saying kind of what I was suggesting, which is if you go in, you're in for months and you make any 2-state solution with more moderate Palestinian administrative authorities impossible, because there's just going to be so much carnage and it's just going to. So I don't know what happens here. He says, I understand why this would all happen, but friends don't let friends drive while enraged. Biden has to tell this Israeli government that taking over Gaza without pairing it with a totally new approach to settlements, the West Bank, and a 2-state solution would be a disaster for Israel and a disaster for America. It's Tom Friedman in the Times. I think he's right about that. As I say, I'm not always a fan of everything he does, but I love that. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.